Chapter 1. One dark and stormy night. All was quiet in the sleepy town of Middleton. Not a creature was stirring, nor were there any to see. At Middleton Junior High, Janitor Bud, a former all-city starring quarterback with questionable life choices, was working the late shift one single evening. And this may sound spooky, but given Bud's current situation, he actually enjoyed his time alone. He would stroll through the halls, puffing his chest out, recreating such famed times he remembered from his younger days. Throwing the game-winning touchdown pass. Oh yes, that cliche was in there. Or dating the smoking hot cheerleader, Cindy Lou Woo. Yes, those were those days. The days that had long been forgotten. But not by Bud. On this particular dark and dreary night, Janitor Bud would never be the same ever again. It was just about 9 o'clock on the dot. Janitor Bud was just about finishing up his shift. As I said earlier, Bud enjoyed having the school to himself so that he could remember the good old days when he used to be king in those same halls. Janitor Bud was cleaning up in the lunchroom area when suddenly a large crash down the hall shook Bud to his very core, spooking him 10 feet in the air, causing him to grip his mop like it was a lethal weapon. He shook with fear. No one was supposed to be there but him. He had thought to himself, what if these were burglars? He only had one lesson of Taekwondo, and plus, he just ate a questionable chalupa. No matter, as a government employee, it was his civic duty to protect the school. At least, that's what he told himself. Bud peeked his head out of the lunchroom doors, carefully holding it open, so when slammed shut, alerting any unwanted visitors of his existence. Then, he leaned up against the wall, sucking in his beer belly, thinking it could give away his position, laying his arms out flat, plastered on the wall like he was in Mission Impossible. Bud dragged himself against the wall, slowly, making his way back to the janitor's closet, where, in his mind, he would have more objects to defend himself with. The noises kept coming. The sound of glass shattering continued, met with someone, or something, groaning and grunting. Janitor Bud was dripping from the sweat beneath his armpits. The closest he had come from fighting off a criminal was a camping trip years ago when a raccoon stole his tuna sandwich. Whew, finally, Janitor Bud whispered, reaching that cracked open door to the janitor's closet, sliding his sweaty palm to the door handle and opening it as slowly as he could. He slipped into the closet easily and instantly shut the door behind him. He searched all over the racks, trying desperately to find something to fight off the bad guys, but all he had was a can of grease killer, a sponge, and a copy of Cat Frenzy magazine, and it wasn't even the good issue. He had felt defeated. That is until he came up with the genius idea to spray the sponge with the grease killer and fold the magazine like a rolled up newspaper for backup. Janitor Bud followed in the same direction in which the noises seemed to be coming from. Okay, Bud, this is it. It's time to put up or shut up, he mumbled, taking sharp breaths, trying to hype himself up. Hiya! He called out, leaping into the doorway like a ninja, yanking that rolled up newspaper from behind his back post haste. To Bud's surprise, no one was there. Garbage and glass covered the floor below, but there was no sign of anyone around. This was puzzling to Bud. Just seconds before he sprang like a ballerina, he could hear things being thrown all over the place. "Hello?" Bud called out, but got no response. "This is a government facility. Please exit immediately or I will be forced to take affirmative action," Bud stated as though it was the truth. Bud searched the room some more, but there was no one in sight. Feeling proud, he puffed his chest out in accomplishment. "Yeah, you better run, you little runts," he said to himself, proudly lowering his weapons like he won, turning around to leave the room. In that exact moment, Janitor Bud began his walk back to the lunchroom to grab his equipment to clean up the mess and get ready to go home. When he returned to the messy room, something had changed. The garbage and the glass had been cleaned up. Things were getting weird, and Bud knew it. "What the?" Bud asked.
"There will be none of that, young man,"
a ghastly voice called out from behind. "Oh no," Bud growled, his eyes bulging from his skull, sweat dripping from his forehead. "Mrs. Lippenstein?" Bud turned around slowly to face her. Her skin shined with a gooey green, eyes darkened with evil. Bud could barely stand to look at her as she slapped a ruler against the palm of her hands, sending an echo through the halls, practically shattering eardrums.
"Seems you need to stay after class to learn a little something about respect,"
she said maliciously in a ghoulish tone, sending chills down Bud's spine. Ah! Bud's screams echoed throughout those halls, beaming to the outside, but no one would hear him. The next day, in the suburbs of Middleton, a fresh, warm morning, Zachary Allen Nelson, also known as Zack, a hero in his own world, but a whiz on rollerblades, slept comfortably in his bed, with his arm hanging over the side and a small puddle from his mouth sliding down the side of his bed. Millie, his trusty English bulldog, trotted into his room gleefully, a charming smile on her face and a happy pep in her step. She moseyed over to his side of the bed, promptly licking his face to wake him up. This was a regular thing. "I didn't do it," Zack claimed, springing upright in bed, with one side of his beach blonde hair slapped against the side of his head, one eye still closed and a piece of candy wrapper stuck to his cheek. "Zack," his mom called out, "you're gonna be late again." Zack looked over at his alarm. "Oh, crud." Zack fell out of his bed, trying to move quickly as possible. He trampled like a herd down the stairs, throwing his backpack over his shoulder, all while buttoning his pants and slipping his shoes on, grabbing a freshly baked Pop-Tart from the toaster. "Oh, hot, 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 hot." "Zack, sit down and eat, and take those dang skates off," his dad quipped, sipping a steamy cup of coffee and reading the daily funnies in the newspaper. "They're called rollerblades, Dad, and I can't. I'm gonna be late. And if you're late to Mrs. Hershey's class, you get a front row seat to her hairy lip." Zack dashed out the front door. "Wait, how about his mother trailed off, realizing Zack had already left. "Glass of juice." Zack leapt off the porch and raced down the walkway. He weaved in and out of traffic on the sidewalk, people walking their dogs and mailmen attempting to deliver without being checked like a hockey player. "Watch out!" Zack shouted, ducking under a mailbag, making the mailman spin in a 180-degree circle. Hey, watch where you're going, you dang kids, the mailman barked, clutching his bag to his chest. Zack didn't respond. He was checking his watch every few seconds to see how close he was cutting it. Car horns shot from every direction as Zack scaled the sidewalk, trying to cut through town to get to school quicker, taking alleyways and trespassing through the neighbors' backyards. Oh man, I can't be late again. This time I might actually smell her upper lip, Zack complained to himself, picking up the pace. As Zack neared the school, he noticed police cars and fire trucks were jam-packed in front. Zack saw his best friend Sophie up ahead and skated over to her. Sophie and Zack had been best friends since Sophie pushed Will Wheeler down after he stole Zack's lunch money in the 2nd grade. Dude, what's going on? Zack said to Sophie. Janitor Bud totally freaked out. No way. Way. Said he saw a ghost. Personally, I think he finally just lost his marbles. Zack looked on as police and paramedics escorted a very frightened and frazzled janitor Bud into the back of an ambulance. There was something Zack noticed. He definitely looked like a man who had seen a ghost, but not like a man who would make it up. Awesome, Zack said, with a smile ear to ear. Later that day, as Zack sat in science class, all he could do was think about the idea that a possible ghost haunted Middleton Junior High. Did you pour the acid yet? Sophie asked, dressed in a lab coat, holding a beaker with gloves on. Zack didn't acknowledge. Hello, Earth to Zack, Sophie said, bringing Zack out of his trance. Huh? What? He responded, sitting up straight immediately. Dude, are you still on that ghost thing? Let it go. Oh, come on, you're not? It's Janitor Bud, the same guy who claims his ex-wife is an alien from outer space. I'm not saying it's a little far-fetched, but come on. A ghost? How rad would that be? Sophie thought to herself. Pretty rad. But again, it's Janitor Bud. A little too rich for my blood, if you ask me. I say we check it out. We, as in we come after hours, break in and roam the spooky halls at night? I think not, Sophie said, walking a dirty beaker over to the sink to wash it. Oh, come on. We've been talking about this since we were kids. We still are kids, dude. You know what I mean. This will be the adventure of a lifetime. Or we'll get caught, and then it will be the grounding of a lifetime. You're such a chicken. Sophie slapped her palm down on the sink, pointed a finger at Zack. Take that back. Mrs. Hershey, who at first glance could be mistaken for an older Shelley Duvall, round glass frames that hung off the edge of her sharp nose, overheard the dispute between Sophie and Zack, and immediately approached their lab table. Is there a problem, Mr. Nelson? Mrs. Hershey scolded, looking down at Zack with daggers in her eyes. Why, of course not, Mrs. Hershey, Zack replied. I was just telling Sophie here how you are the best teacher in school. Mm-hmm. Mrs. Hershey didn't buy Zack's sentiment for a second. She knew what he was trying to do, and couldn't help but scold him even harsher. Get back to work. Yes, Mrs. Hershey. Whatever you say, Mrs. Hershey, Zack replied sarcastically, showcasing a cheesy grin, making direct eye contact, clearly sucking up. Once Mrs. Hershey turned around to check on the other students, Zack turned his attention back to Sophie. Wow, she does not like you, Sophie said. What else is new? Zack replied. So, what do you say? To tonight? Zack said excitedly. Sophie mulled it over in her head. I don't know. I have a huge math test tomorrow morning, and I'll have you home by 9. Promise, Zack assured her. Sophie squinted her eyes, bit her lip, thinking about it for a second. Okay. But if we get caught, I'm saying you kidnapped me. Deal, Zack agreed, shaking hands with Sophie. Later that night, back at Zack's house, Zack sat down to dinner with his family. Luckily, tonight he wouldn't have to lie too much to get out of it. His mother made a veggie casserole with spinach on top. May I be excused? I don't feel so good, he said, hugging his stomach with both hands. Oh no, is everything okay, honey? His mother asked, worriedly. My tummy hurts. I think I need to go lie down. Okay, go on up. I'll be there in a minute. Zack's eyes grew big. No! No. I'll be fine. I just need a rest. I think I'm going through puberty. So please, whatever you do, don't come up. At all. I'll be fine. Are you sure? I can bring you a cup of soup, his mother insisted. I'm sure, Zack barked, hurrying to his room. His bedroom door shut harshly. What do you think is up with him? His mother asked. He's 13. He's just gonna get worse, his dad replied. Zack locked the door behind him. Just in case, his smother for a mother decided against his better wishes and checked on him anyways. He ran to his closet to grab his duffel bag with all his supplies. Then, he got to his window, opened it up gently, not to make a sound, and slickly maneuvered his way out of his bedroom window. That, unfortunately for him, was on the second floor. He sidestepped carefully his way along the tiles, narrowly slipping off the edge. He got over to the ladder, he set it for himself on the side of the house, and climbed down carefully. Zack hopped on his bike and rode away as fast as he could. That night, back at the school, Sophie was waiting impatiently. She'd made sure to stay in the dark area so she wasn't to be seen. Where are you, Zack? She mumbled under her breath. Just when she'd almost given up, Zack rode into eyesight, easing Sophie's worry. Where were you, dude? Sophie demanded. I've been freezing my chords off for 20 minutes. Hey, cut me some slack. I had to make sure they bought it, Zack replied, standing his bike up against the building, slipping his bag off and grabbing some flashlights out of it. Let's just get this over with, Sophie said, shaking as she held her flashlight. Zack and Sophie slipped through a slightly cracked open window in the gym. Sophie had been in gymnastics since she was 6, so for her, the jump up to the window was a little easier. For Zack, on the other hand, was not so easy. He stood on his tippy toes on a trash can lid, nearly falling off, needing Sophie to reach out and pull him up. Thanks, Zack said out of breath. Let's just hurry up and get this over with so I can go home, Sophie said, shivering. Where's your sense of adventure? Zack said. It's sitting on my couch with a tub of ice cream in its lap. Zack shrugs off her comment. and the two of them make their way into the school hallway. So, how are we gonna know if there's a ghost? Sophie asks. I don't know, just look for flying objects. Then you know you've reached your destination, Zack replied sarcastically. A comment that earned him a nudge from Sophie with her shoulder, the two then exchanging smirks. Zack and Sophie arrived near where Janitor Bud claimed to have seen this ghostly figure. Zack pulled out a cold hand radio, pulling the antenna to its max height. Sophie looked over to notice the radio. She giggled at the look of it. What are you gonna do? Scare it with some old phony music? You laugh, but this radio works off a frequency. So if we point it the right direction, it should pick up electromagnetic energy in the room, Zack replied. Sophie had changed up her attitude. She instead was a little more intrigued by Zack's knowledge. How do you know so much about this stuff? Tiger beat, Zack replied without hesitation. The halls were as silent as the dead. A glimmer reflection of the overhead lights highlighted the rusted lockers of Middleton. Zack and Sophie had already spent over an hour searching every room of the school, and exhaustion began to take its toll. There's nothing here. Let's just go home, Sophie insisted exhaustedly. The sound of glass shattering down the hall came immediately after Sophie's words. Did you hear that? Zack whispered. I'm right next to you. Of course I heard it, Sophie replied, annoyed. Glass began to break viciously. We should go, Sophie said, trembling with fear, latching onto Zack's sleeve. Are you kidding? Zack asked. It's just getting good and you want to go now? Glass continued to break. Zack, come on. What if it's a psycho murderer? And he decided to break into a middle school and break glass? I don't think so. Zack, I'm not kidding. It's time to go, Sophie said, tugging at Zack's sleeve, trying to get him to follow her lead. Look, you can leave if you want, but I'm staying. If I can prove that ghosts are real, I could be famous, Zack said happily. You could also be dead, Sophie replied, staring directly through Zack. Zack ignored Sophie's pleads. He instead decided to go stealth mode and creep up on the room, video camera in hand, ready to catch the ghost red-handed. Zack turned the video camera on himself to start recording and whispered, Okay guys, this is Zachary Allen Nelson coming to you live from Middleton Junior High. What I'm about to show you may not be suitable for children under 13 or 11. What you are about to witness is so terrifying, so sinister, that only I, Zachary Allen Nelson, could bring it to you live. Zack turned the camera back around, setting it on his shoulder, slowly inching up the camera into the science lab. What you're witnessing is a real-life ghost, a restless spirit desperately trying to cross over, Zack whispered. As Zack was busy playing reporter, Sophie had decided to creep up behind him without his knowledge. While he was distracted capturing a ghost, Sophie peeked into the room to see for her own eyes. Noticing something was off, she tapped Zack on his shoulder. Zack, not now. I'm recording my masterpiece. No, you're recording a boring science lab. What are you talking about? Sophie pointed to the room. Zack stood up and realized nothing was there, and no action was taking place. Zack was befuddled. Seconds ago, he could have sworn he heard noises coming from this room. Oh man, what a waste of film, he complained. Can we go home now? Sophie asked. Sophie and Zack turned to head back to the window in which they had slipped in through.
Naughty, naughty children.
There was that same ghastly voice. Sophie and Zack froze in their tracks, overcome with fear trembling from head to toe. They both turned to look at each other.
Children in the hall should have a hall pass. If you don't have a hall pass,
The voice instructed. Zack and Sophie now turning around to face the figure.
then you must go to detention.
The hideous ghostly figure flew across the hallway floor, charging towards Sophie and Zack. Neither of them could move an inch. All they could do was scream. Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in tonight to the first episode of Zack vs the Paranormal. I hope you enjoyed your time here. If you liked it, please click that subscribe button and make sure to give us a like. And also don't be afraid to leave us a comment, good or bad. Let us know how you liking it so far. What do you think is going to happen in the next few episodes? Let us know what you think. Let us know how you're liking it. And yeah, we will see you here next Wednesday. Same Zack time, same Zack channel.